BetOnline is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for all of your sports betting action. Baseball season is in full swing, and we're into the NBA, NHL playoffs, and BetOnline has more ways to stay in on the action with the latest odds, news, and scores, even live in-game betting with the games when they are being played. With the largest selection of odds on everything from Major League Baseball, NBA, NHL, and UFC, BetOnline remains the best online source for all of your sports wagering information. In between games, head over to the BetOnline Casino with all of the top Vegas-style games, including poker and live casino. BetOnline, the game starts here. Hello, everyone. Welcome to this week's edition of the Bleav in Bengals podcast with yours truly, Solomon Wilcots, and our Bengals insider, Charlie Goldsmith. Charlie, news is breaking around the National Football League and within the Cincinnati Bengals building because Trey Hendrickson has released a statement after being silent for so long. What are you hearing? What did he say?
Trey Hendrickson released a statement to ESPN saying basically that there's been no conversation between him and the Bengals since the draft, saying that they have a very limited interest in reaching what he called mutual goals. And that, to me, this just continues a trend of the offseason, which is Trey wants a long-term lucrative deal with the Bengals. The Bengals clearly aren't as eager to lock up Hendrickson on that deal with what that would reflect, investing in a pass rusher entering his 30s. And that's created an ultimate stalemate. It's really been a stalemate since this thing began. Originally, Hendrickson's trying to do what he can to try to, spark something, to try to get the public favor on his side, to try to send the Bengals a message, because clearly, again, there hasn't been much communication. That's led to him being very vocal publicly about this. But I don't know that that's gone a very long way within the Bengals organization right now.
No, they seem to have be really tone deaf to public statements or any statements coming from outside their building. You and I both know they tend to rest on their fundamental beliefs of how they see it. But let's hear, I'm going to read the statement from Trey Hendrickson. And he said, as of Monday, 12 noon Eastern time, he stated, no communication has taken place between my camp and the Bengals organization post-draft. The offers prior to the draft did not reflect the vision we shared and were promised last offseason if I continued to play at a high level. Coaches are aware of these past conversations. Rather than using collaboration to get us to a point to bring me home to the team, they, meaning the coaches, are no longer communicating. I have been eagerly awaiting a resolution of this situation, but that's hard to do when there is no discussion and evident lack of interest in reaching mutual goals. This sounds very disappointing. Basically, what he's saying there's been no conversation since the draft has ended, that no one from the Cincinnati Bengals has reached out to him and talking with his people on his side of it, and that even the coaching staff is not talking to him any longer. That, for me, is very alarming, Charlie.
In some ways, the coaching staff has its hands tied behind their back because they would love to have Trey Hendrickson on their team in 2025. But as you balance short term, which is something the coaching staff is always focused on this year, and the front office looks at that lens as well, but they're also looking at specifically, again, paying someone into their 30s, the long-term lens as well. Yes, the coaching staff, they're put in a tough spot. There's only so much they can do. They'd like Hendrickson to be a happy, willing participant on their team this year and into the future, but it's the front office's job to weigh that and assess what the right price for that will be. The big takeaway here is there's just been a massive gap in between how the Bengals view Trey Hendrickson and how Trey Hendrickson views Trey Hendrickson. Again, nothing's changed. It's been a stalemate. It's just Hendrickson's trying to take a shot wherever he can to try to find some spark somewhere to try to skew things his way.
Okay, these things are complicated. I'm not going to sit here and pretend that they're easy and that everyone is going to agree on how they should be handled. I'm going to parse the three different verticals of how you have to understand what's taking place here. The Cincinnati Bengals are arguing that despite the fact that Trey Hendrickson has led all edge rushers in sacks over the last 2 years, He led everybody in sacks last year. But even if you take his production over the last 2 years, he's outproduced all the other edge rushers, including Myles Garrett, right? Including Max Crosby, including Danielle Hunter. Those are the top 3 edge rushers in the game. Nick Bosa is 4th when it comes to his average salary. The Bengals are contending that because he's 30 years of age, he doesn't deserve to be in their category. That for some reason he is a risk to pay moving forward. I even heard director of pro personnel, my good friend Duke Tobin, say, we don't pay you for what you've done in the past. We pay you for what you're going to do in the future. I totally disagree. There is none of us as consumers that we go in and pay for future production. All future production in terms of what we're going to pay is based on past production. The metrics are based on Myles Garrett is getting $40 million a year. Yeah, they hope he's going to continue to produce like he did in the past, but it's because those metrics is based on his past production. Every single player, your past production, it tells you, it gives the team faith that they can reward you based on what you've done, that you're going to continue to do it. Well, the Bengals are contending that because Trey Hendrickson is the magical age of 30 years old, you're not going to continue to do that. So we're going to pay you less. Well, in my mind, that's akin to betting against your player. Now, they already betted against him, and he proved them wrong and led the league in sacks. They already bet against Ja'Marr Chase. All he did was get out and achieve the Triple Crown. They betted against T. Higgins. All he did was, give him another stellar year, and they had to overpay. My point is, you don't get to use a player's age to say, we don't think you can do that again. And they've already did it once, and he did do it again. So I think that's, to me, I could see where he has a much stronger leg to stand on than they do. Go ahead, I'll let you weigh in on that.
From my perspective, here's where you can criticize the Bengals. You can criticize the Bengals for not being decisive and doing what they could have done to avoid this. They could have traded Hendrickson before the start of free agency, opened up cap space, tried to replace Hendrickson through a worse player, but through a veteran pass rusher, and then use a high draft pick, which they did, on a defensive end to work in as that starter. You could have made that decision and foresaw the sequence that was inevitable as soon as you decided that you weren't going to pay Trey Hendrickson however many $1 million a year like he was asking for. You could have avoided this, but it's not it was not 100% certain decision by any means. I would not have signed Hendrickson to a long-term extension. It's not just 30 for me. It's when you look at how he earned his pressures and sacks last year, who he was going up against, the left tackles and the quarterbacks situationally, how at winning times and winning moments, Hendrickson more often than not was not there. There were real holes you could poke at Hendrickson's season. Again, that's worth a lot, but it's not as much as Hendrickson's asking for, and that's fine. You'll find a GM somewhere who believes Hendrickson is exactly what he's asking for. It's just from the Bengals' perspective, you could have avoided this headache if you didn't view him as that by taking care of this process back in March.
That was going to be my other point. If you don't see him valued as that, you can't place that value on him in terms of trade compensation. The two are thoroughly inconsistent. If you're going to tell a player you're not worth X, then you can't ask for X from the other team on the other side of the trade table. You see what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. They're placing a trade value on him that's similar to the compensation value that he has placed on himself. And in that sense, the Cincinnati Bengals are being very inconsistent with what they're telling Trey. We don't see you worth that. But then when they go to the other team sitting across the trade table, they're placing a totally different value on him that's complementary to what Trey is asking for.
And you're right. From the Bengals' perspective, they might as well have been asking for a third-round pick, considering how they view him.
That's right.
Maybe they should have just taken a third-round pick for Trey Hendrickson back in March. That would have gotten you your pass rushing defensive tackle that you don't have. You would have had $15 extra million to go out and get like Dale Odengbo, and you're fine. Then you're stable. Then everyone's at OTAs this week. But instead, all you do, because of your drawn out process of getting contracts with everyone done is put yourself in a position where a player like Trey gets this frustrated.
Last year, they could have signed him to a new deal. I know he still had 2 years left on his deal. He did want a bump in pay. And this is similar to exactly what the Houston Texans did with Danielle Hunter. They put down another $50 million onto his deal, added another year onto it. He seemingly has basically 2 years left. And right now, he's the second highest paid edge rusher in the National Football League at what, $35.6 million per year, just a skosh higher than Max Crosby. If you ask me, has Max Crosby or Danielle Hunter outproduced and outplayed Trey Hendrickson? I would tell you absolutely not. He's as good a player, if not better, than they are. Now, Max Crosby's younger. Danielle Hunter isn't. Danielle Hunter's 10 years into the league and got the contract extension. He had got more guaranteed money placed on his contract, and all they did was add it one more year. That would have been the smart thing to do. But I think the Bengals tend to be late to the game on this mathematical sort of game of being behind the market as opposed to being out in front of it. That's why they end up paying both of their wide receivers more. And they don't want to end up doing that with Trey. I get it. But the problem should have been rectified a year ago. The problem should have been rectified before the draft where they could have traded him. And that's how they find themselves in this situation.
Part of the job of running a football team from a personnel standpoint is making tough decisions. You know, the Chiefs trading Tyreek Hill set them up to win multiple Super Bowls. But instead of having foresight in the vision and getting out in front of a lot of these deals, the Bengals have been behind. And again, that cost the Bengals opportunity and flexibility in free agency this year. It cost them the potential of a draft pick or two. There are all these ways where you see that add up. And then when you look at that and then you look at it from the player's side, like, from the player side, you know, if you don't participate in training camp, if you don't show up to OTAs, like, this is why. It's because teams treat this stuff like a business. Players get very few chances to take things into their own hands. And when it's coming like that from one side, it can also come from both sides where the player has that much at stake.
And when the player tends to treat it as business, fans don't tend to like it. But I think we have to have some nuance in our understanding that players understanding there's limited time for them to take advantage of their talent, as you just described. They have to strategically, at that most inopportune time, decide to say, hey, look, let's hit a pause button until we can get the business side of this right. Everyone who knows Trey Hendrickson knows that he is a stellar human being. He's a hard worker, and he wants to do right by his football team. But you know what? He has another team also. It's called his family. And later in life, he's got to make sure he's done right by them. That taking care of them at the most inopportune time, this is where the crossroads are. You said something earlier, at least he mentioned in his statement, that coaches have cut off communication, or at least they're not talking to him. And he thought, at least in the statement, that was detrimental, that he wanted to be talking with his coaches. And you had asked me prior to this recording that, is it the coach's job to be talking to Trey Hendrickson? And then I said, absolutely, it is their job, but not about the contract. Like, coaches it's not their job to negotiate contracts. It's not their job to speak for the team to Trey Hendrickson about his contract negotiation. Those are really off limits. That's about the front office and the admin side to have those conversations with Trey Hendrickson. But under no circumstances should the coach, your teacher, particularly your position coach and your coordinator and your head coach, should be cutting off the player from communication, because you're their coach. It's not I'm your coach 90% of the time or 85% of the time or under what circumstance I am your coach or not. You never cut off communication with your players. They are always made to feel part of the team, and in this case, a significant part of your team. Because if you cut him off, how do you get that relationship back? If you're Al Golden or if you're the defensive line coach, if you want to talk to Trey Hendrickson every single day. That's my job as a coach, to keep him engaged with the team, to keep him feeling part of it all, even if he's away and not present. at OTAs or at mini camp. I'm letting him know, here are the things we're working on. Here's how we're communicating, because he's my player. I'm never going to divorce myself from my player, despite what acrimony he may be going through with the organization, because there's going to come a time he's going to come walking back into the locker room, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're going to need to be the bridge. As a coach, I have to serve as a bridge for him coming back into the fold. And that relationship has to be strong, because that's how you keep players emotionally connected to their football team, right? I'm sure he's going to be talking to some of his teammates, but the coach is really the connective tissue for getting that done. As a coach, I cannot allow myself to get caught up in contract negotiations. In fact, I'm going to help my player keep his mind focused on all the right things during this tough and critical time.
And what's another dynamic is this is a brand new coaching staff.
Yep.
These are guys who have to develop and build from scratch those relationships with Trey Hendrickson, despite never working with him before. Another underrated element of this is some of Trey Hendrickson's quote unquote guys in the locker room. The guys, you ride or die with, the guys who've been through the battles with you. You went to the Super Bowl, you went through the wars. DJ Reader's gone.
Yeah.
Well, Sam Hubbard's gone.
Yeah.
Von Bell's gone.
Mike Hilton.
Jermaine Pratt. Mike Hilton gone.
Yep.
Jermaine Pratt going to be gone. Who is Trey talking to? Who can say, come on, Trey? And all right, those guys are BJ Hill and Joseph Osai. Those are friends of Trey. They've been close with Trey. But there's much less, of an anchor that Hendrickson has in that locker room right now. And that creates another variable here where, when you look at what are you loyal to is a question I always ask. Mm-hmm. Hendrickson certainly not loyal to the front office. I think he has been loyal to Zach. But
yes.
You mentioned coaches in this statement. All right, that's something here. You have a brand new defensive line coach, a brand new defensive coordinator, and so many of your guys in that locker room aren't there anymore. So what are you loyal to? That's a question you can ask about Trey Hendrickson right now, and that leads to a lot of frustration, I'm sure, on his end.
I have great trust in the Cincinnati Bengals coaching staff to do the right thing here. I certainly know Zach is someone who is very reasonable. He has said, and we're going to talk about this a little later, that his job this offseason was not only to get the team off to a fast start, but part of that was building closer bonds, right? Having the players get to know each other, having them to spend time bonding with one another. They're going to play a little bit more in the preseason and all those things. It's so vitally important to the team getting off to the fast start that I would think the coach's engagement with their players while they're going through the contract dispute, that would be part of keeping players engaged. That would be part of getting off to a fast start. Before we move on, I want to get a thought from you on Jermaine Pratt. Where is he right now? Is he expected to participate in the offseason training program? Where is he right now with this team and with this coaching staff? What's the expectation entering 2025?
Pratt hasn't seemed to be in their plans for this season. That's why, you draft two linebackers. That's why you, in some guys' opinions, reach on a linebacker in the second round, a guy who often gets compared to Jermaine Pratt. I'm honestly surprised that the move hasn't happened yet. The Bengals are probably holding out for a trade. There might be some cap ramifications involved as well, but there hasn't been any momentum towards Jermaine Pratt having a 2025 future with the Bengals.
Charlie, I got to ask you, please explain why Shemar Stewart is present during OTAs, but still sitting out of the on-field practice drills during the Bengals version of a rookie minicamp. What's going on here?
I'll start here. Rookie minicamp. You and I might as well be going through rookie minicamp right now. Rookie minicamp is, the Titans were playing we're playing a rock, paper, scissors at rookie minicamp.
Yeah.
The Bengals weren't doing it, but that was basically what the Bengals were doing. I don't know that Stewart and Demetrius Knight missed out on anything by not being on-field participants in rookie minicamp. Now, their contracts haven't been signed yet. Yep. That's not new. Jamar Chase took a while to get his contract done as a first-round pick. Same with Dax Hill. Same with Miles Murphy. Amarius Mims didn't sign his, I believe, until late July last season. Joe Burrow, I think, didn't sign his until August in 2020. That's not new. What's new here is that the guys who haven't signed aren't on the field before they've signed. And from what I understand, from what I've read, there's a waiver that you can sign that can get you through the process and have you covered. And having not looked at those waivers, I would bet there's something, a part of that process that either has changed or the players would like to see, change, because that's the only difference. Players not signing their contracts yet is nothing new, but again, not being on the field before then is new. And since that ties to the waiver process, I'd be interested to learn more about that, but I haven't been able to see one of those waivers.
Yeah, those waivers are pretty much an insurance that if something were to happen to you during the practice, then you would be covered to go and sign the contract. The contract would still be in force, providing you sign the contract. So the waiver sort of indemnifies you from the injury, and you would still be able to sign your contract as if you were healthy. You should know that this rookie minicamp, they haven't entered a phase where you're even going up against the opposing defense. You're just out there doing some drills. You're barely running around. Fear of getting injured in this form of a practice is a non-starter. I'm sorry, Charlie. You and I both know it. They're just going through drills, but they're not even allowed to be in any drills going up against the opposed guys on the opposing side of the ball. So you're literally just on the field doing nothing. So why they're not participating, because to me, it makes no sense. If you are afraid to sign the waiver and using that as a reason why I don't want to sign that waiver. I mean, I think we all heard Shemar Stewart say, well, I didn't sign that piece of paper. That, to me, I think it's very flippant. You are now a professional. It's your job to know your business. And oh, by the way, I don't like it when players hide behind agents. You're the guy in the arena.
You're right.
You're the guy in the arena. You're the one who has to play. You're the professional here. You don't let an agent tell you if you're going to practice or not. You tell the agent, get the business done so I can be on the field with my teammates. That's how it works.
The agent works for the player, and you would know that better than I, but the agent works for the player.
That's right. And you can see I can get a little hot about this one, because I just think this is time to grow up. It's just time to grow up. To me, if I was a player coming in, I had low production, high draft status, I want to reward my team. I want my teammates and the players around me believing in me. I'm doing everything I can to remove all doubt as to what kind of player I am. And this speaks to the issue. Do you love the game, or do you love what the game does for you? Because I believe players who love the game find a reason to get on the field. They don't hide behind technicalities and paperwork to not be on the field, Charlie.
And this is one of the few times too that the business side comes into play for a player on their rookie contract. This won't be a conversation again until you're past, year 3, as you're looking forward to an extension. What you've seen is these types of conversations creep up earlier and earlier. It used to be just, the old vets who had their contract situations play out in a more public way. And then it became, all right, people wanting, their first contract extension, or maybe the top quarterbacks saw their contract situations play out more publicly. But now, it's even first and second round pick rookies who aren't, quarterbacks who are trying to make these business decisions that definitely come across as a surprise.
Yeah, I think it's rather technical, somewhat silly. These rookie contracts are all collectively bargained. As you well know, it's boilerplate. Under this collective bargaining agreement, I can negotiate the terms for any player coming in, because it's all slotted, as you well know. The wiggle room to negotiate any kind of advancement above the next guy is so narrow that it makes no sense, right? So it's really about getting the work done. It's about getting it done and starting to build relationships. And I wanted to ask you, because we're talking about the business side of this, what about the football side? How frustrating is this for Zach Taylor and new defensive coordinator Al Golden not to have his top 2 draft picks, both on the defensive side of the ball, as you would have it, not on the practice field during this elementary phase of the offseason training program?
I'll be honest, because of how little they did on Friday, I don't think there was much of a reaction to those guys not being on the field then. But when you get to this coming, or I guess today, Monday, as we record this, we don't know yet if they were on the practice field today. Practice will be open to the media on Tuesday we will get to see if Stewart and Knight are participating. If they're on the field on Tuesday, to be honest, all's probably forgiven. They're a part of the real ramp-up process of installing the defense, of getting their feet under them, of kind of building this whole defense over again, which is what this, summer program is for. If they're on the field on Tuesday, it's all fine. But if they're not and this continues, that's definitely something different than what we've seen around the league in the past and including this season.
There's some things you just can't unlearn about people. You just want to see them come to work. And to me, this always keeps coming up as the fans stop me. What do I think about Shemar Stewart? I say, look, you watch the tape, this guy can flat out play. I'm not worried about the sack total, even though it's on my mind. I cannot divorce myself from that low level of production, particularly when I see the skill set that he has. Well, then when the next thing I learn is that, he's not willing to practice, not willing to work based on the technicality that indemnifies the team, or basically where he would still be paid if he got hurt. He hasn't signed a piece of paper. I'm like, are you kidding me? And so now I start to question your love for the game, your love to get out there and work. And I get it. You got to take care of the business first. Well, get it done so that you could do the thing that you love the most. Charlie, before we go, I got one question for you. Zach Taylor has talked about getting his team off to a fast start. He talked about team bonding during the offseason phase leading up to training camp in the preseason. Are there anything specifically we can anticipate him doing with getting these players together, getting the buy-in from everybody? Because when you have a rookie that won't sign a piece of paper so he can practice, you have a veteran in Trey Hendrickson that the coaches aren't talking to because there's a contract dispute. This thing is not getting off to a good start, is it?
Well, I'll answer it's not, no. They're trying. There's only so much you can do. Take this for what you will. They flipped the offensive linemen and defensive linemen in the locker room. So the defensive linemen are kind of now right in the middle, kind of at the heart of all of it, as opposed to being kind of sanctioned off on a corner. Now the offensive linemen are there, but they're fine. The offensive line culture is probably the best culture of any position room on the team. So the defense having the completed locker room for the whole summer. Last year they were renovating it, probably does help. What I know is a lot of players kind of who are younger guys, but now kind of our older guys are taking different initiatives of planning this away from the facility, of sending a message to this guy about this. Like, they're doing stuff like that where you're seeing some of the younger who are now older guys step up into bigger roles. Now, does that translate into a win in September? We'll see. There's a lot of work between now and then, but it has been a topic of conversation.
Really good stuff from our very own Charlie Goldsmith. Thank you for checking in with us. There's going to be a lot going on in the subsequent days and weeks to come as it pertains to the Trey Hendrickson contract and even the rookies who all they got to do is sign a waiver. You don't have to sign the contract yet. I get it. Got to dot the I's and cross the T's, but get out on the practice field. No one wants to see a slow start for guys who are highly drafted. That's a significant investment the Bengals have already made in some of those players. And on defense, where we need immediate growth, you can't afford to lose one day, one rep, not being on the practice field. He is Charlie Goldsmith. I am Solomon Wilcots. Thank you for joining us, everyone, on this edition of the Bleav in Bengals podcast. We'll see you next time.